Hi everyone, I'm Amy. So Road to Empress 2 is almost here, and we will return to the imperial court as Wu Yuanzhao, a character inspired by Wu Zetian, as we continue our journey toward becoming empress of the Tang Dynasty. The first game ended with the main character Wu Yuanzhao abandoned in the Ganye temple after the death of Emperor Taizong, and the second game should pick up shortly after where the first game left off. The time should be in the early 650s. Li Zhi is the new Emperor Gaozong, and there is a new Empress. Now, if you haven't played the first Road to Empress game, that's okay, because I'm not here to talk about the game itself. Instead, I want to explore the real Chinese history behind the game. In a previous video, I played through the first Road to Empress. So if you want to see the beginning of the story that led us here, please check out that video. I'll leave the link in the description below. Today, let's take a look at some of the new historical characters that we will meet in the second game, with brief introductions based on their historical records. Now, I won't be covering their entire life stories because I don't want to spoil what might happen in the game until we actually get to play it. Let's start with the woman sitting on the throne. Road to Empress 2 should start with Empress Wang already on the throne of Empress as the first wife of Li Zhi, who would now be Emperor Gaozong. In Chinese history, Empress Wang was the first primary wife and empress of Emperor Gaozong. She comes from the prestigious Wang clan of Taiyuan, one of the most respected noble lineages in China, with roots going back to the southern and northern dynasties. Her ancestor Wang Sizhen has served as a senior minister in the western Wei dynasty, and her father was a county magistrate. And the Wang family was connected to the Tang dynasty imperial house through marriage. Li Zhi's own great-aunt, Princess Tong'an, had married into the Wang clan, and it was Princess Tong'an who recommended the young lady Wang to Emperor Taizong, praising her beauty and suitability. Emperor Taizong agreed and matched her with his son Li Zhi, who was still the Prince of Jing at the time. When Li Zhi was made crown prince in 643, she became crown princess, and her father was promoted to prefect of Chenzhou. On his deathbed, Emperor Taizong held the crown prince's hand and said to his entrusted minister, Chu Suiliang, "My good son and good daughter-in-law, I now entrust them to you." She was handpicked by the emperor, endorsed on his deathbed, protected by a powerful minister, and connected to the imperial family by blood and marriage. On paper, her position looked untouchable. But Empress Wang had two challenges. First, she never bore a son, and she was described as someone who was straightforward and proud, but not skilled at the kind of social maneuvering that palace life demanded. She did not cultivate relationships with the other women in the palace. She did not flatter. Her mother and uncle were reportedly rude to the other consorts when they visited. And eventually, even with her strong family background and powerful connections, she became isolated within the imperial harem. She began to lose the favor of Emperor Gaozong to other consorts, the most important one being Imperial Consort Xiao. Empress Wang tried several things to protect her position. She had Emperor Gaozong's eldest son, Li Zhong, adopted as her own. Later, she helped secure his position as crown prince, hoping this would strengthen her standing. But none of it was enough to stop Imperial Consort Xiao's growing influence. So Empress Wang made a desperate gamble. She knew that Emperor Gaozong had once been attracted to Wu Zetian, who was still living as a nun at Ganye Temple. According to historical records, when the emperor visited the temple to offer incense, he saw Wu Zetian, and both of them wept. When Empress Wang heard about this, she secretly told Wu Zetian to grow her hair back and encouraged the emperor to bring her into the palace as a consort. Her plan was simple: use Wu Zetian to draw the emperor's favor away from Consort Xiao. Now, I don't know if Road to Empress 2 will start out in the exact same way, but what I do know is that we also want to be empress. So that means Empress Wang is going to be our enemy. If Empress Wang was the woman on the throne, Consort Xiao of Elegance was the woman who made her afraid of losing it. She is based on the real historical figure, the pure Consort Xiao in Chinese history. She came from the Xiao clan of Lanling, a distinguished southern family. Historical sources describe her as beautiful and cunning, but also proud and jealous, someone who did not bother hiding her ambitions. She and Empress Wang were locked in a bitter rivalry for years. Consort Xiao had been at Li Zhi's side even before he became emperor, while he was still crown prince. She held the rank of Liang Di, one of the highest positions in the crown prince's household. She appears to have been favored over Crown Princess Wang during those years. She gave him a daughter, Princess Yiyang first, then a son, Li Sujie, in 648, and another daughter, Princess Gaoan. When Emperor Gaozong took the throne in 649, Crown Princess Wang became empress, but Consort Xiao was given the rank of pure consort, a really high rank for imperial consorts. But rank was not everything. Consort Xiao had what Empress Wang did not: the emperor's affection and a son. In a world where sons meant political power, Consort Xiao had leverage that Empress Wang could never match. Historical sources say that Consort Xiao was proud and at times disrespectful toward the empress, and Empress Wang resented her deeply for it. So we know that when we return to the imperial court as Wu Yuanzhao, we're going to have to get into the middle of Empress Wang and pure Consort Xiao. I'm guessing that there will be choices in the game that makes us choose between the two. Next, we have Consort Liu of Preciousness. Consort Liu is recorded in history as Palace Lady Liu or Liu Gongren. Her family background and personal name are not recorded in historical records, but we know she was a palace woman of low status who bore Emperor Gaozong's first son, Li Zhong, in 643, when Emperor Gaozong was still the crown prince. We know that Emperor Taizong was thrilled about his grandson. It is said that he was so happy that he wanted to share the joy with everyone. Not much is recorded about Consort Liu after that, likely due to her low status. But we do know that because Empress Wang had no sons of her own, it was suggested that she adopted Li Zhong and have him made crown prince. I mentioned this earlier when I was talking about Empress Wang, and Li Zhong was named crown prince in 652. Now, having played the first game, I won't be surprised if there's a plot point suggesting that Consort Liu was caught in the middle of the battle between Empress Wang and Consort Xiao and eventually killed as a pawn in the game. In Road to Empress 2, Wu Yuanshun is described as your elder sister, only a year older than you, and the closest family you had besides your mother. The game tells us that after you enter the palace, she married an official, and the two of you did not see each other for over a decade. Historically, this character is based on Wu Shun, Wu Zetian's older sister. Wu Shun married Helan Anshi, an official from the Helan family. The marriage produced two children, a son, Helan Mingzhi, and a daughter, known to history only as Lady Helan. Her husband, Helan Anshi, died young, leaving Wu Shun a widow. Wu Shun and Wu Zetian were full sisters, born of the same mother, Lady Yang, and they grew up close. Their father had sons from a previous marriage, and after he died, those half-brothers treated Lady Yang and her daughters poorly. The two sisters shared that experience, and it seems to have bonded them. While Wu Zetian spent years in Emperor Taizong's palace and then at the Ganye temple, Wu Shun was living a very different life on the outside, raising her children as a young widow. The two sisters would not have seen each other for a long time. Historically, once Wu Zetian returned to the palace and began to gain power, Wu Shun was able to enter the palace freely as the empress's sister. There is no record of conflict between them during this early period. It seems like the two sisters were on the same side, and Wu Shun benefited directly from her younger sister's rise, although that would later change. Later stories surrounding Wu Shun, her children, and the imperial court would become some of the most controversial stories associated with Wu Zetian's reign. In Road to Empress 2, we should expect Wu Yuanshun to be an ally, at least at first. If Empress Wang was the most powerful woman in the palace, Chancellor Zhang Sun was the most powerful person in the empire. The Chancellor Zhang Sun of Road to Empress is based on the real historical figure Zhang Sun Wuji. Zhang Sun Wuji is one of the most important figures in early Tang Dynasty history. He was the elder brother of Empress Zhang Sun, the first living empress of the Tang Dynasty, and Emperor Taizong's beloved wife. This made Zhang Sun Wuji the maternal uncle of Emperor Gaozong. He was also close friends with Emperor Taizong from childhood, one of the key supporters who helped Emperor Taizong become emperor in the first place. He was one of the great heroes whose portraits were hung in the Lingyan Pavilion, one of the highest honors for a Tang Dynasty official. On his deathbed, Emperor Taizong said, "Zhang Sun Wuji was utterly loyal to me. That I possess this empire is largely due to his efforts." When Emperor Taizong passed away, the crown prince that would become Emperor Gaozong was still young. So he entrusted a lot of power to Zhangsun Wuji, and Zhangsun Wuji would effectively act as regent to guide the empire for many years. Maybe thanks to Zhangsun Wuji, the early years of Emperor Gaozong's reign are often praised as the continuation of good governance. But Zhangsun Wuji was not just a loyal uncle keeping things stable. He was a man who had spent decades accumulating power, and he had no intentions of giving it up. He had a track record of removing anyone he saw as a threat. He had enormous influence over who rose and who fell at court. And as the emperor's uncle and the most senior chancellor in the empire, no major political change could happen without his approval. Now, for our path to becoming empress, Zhangsun Wuji is going to be a problem. He represents the old order, the power structure that believes it has the right to decide who rules and how. Any path to the throne runs directly through him. Whether that means winning him over, going around him, or finding a way to break through. And then there is Li Yifu. Li Yifu was a man of modest origins from the region of modern Hebei. He was talented as a writer and literary scholar, and he rose through the ranks on the strength of his pen. What makes Li Yifu relevant to Road to Empress 2 is not just his talent, but his history with Emperor Gaozong. He was eventually assigned to the staff of the young prince Li Zhi, who was still the prince of Jing at the time. When Li Zhi was made crown prince in 643, Li Yifu stayed on his staff and was recognized as one of the most talented writers in the crown prince's circle. So by the time Emperor Gaozong took the throne in 649, Li Yifu was already a familiar face, someone who had served the emperor since his days as a young prince. He was promoted to a higher position and was given additional duties, editing the imperial history. He was talented, ambitious, and well connected to the new emperor. But he was not from a powerful noble family. He had risen entirely through literary skills and patronage, which meant he had no independent base of support. In a court dominated by old noble clans and the powerful Zhangsun Wuji, someone like Li Yifu was always one wrong step away from being discarded. He also had a reputation. According to the old book of Tang, Li Yifu appeared warm and humble in manner. Whenever he spoke to someone, he would always smile pleasantly, but inwardly he was petty, jealous, and treacherous. In Road to Empress 2, we're probably going to have to watch out for Li Yifu. He has been at the emperor's side for years. He knows how the court works, and he has every reason to be looking for opportunities. Next, we have Xu Minghui. In Road to Empress 2, Xu Minghui is described as a newcomer to the palace, introduced by Empress Wang, whose elder sister Xu Hui was a dear friend during your days as a Cairen. The game notes that the two sisters look nearly identical, and that even knowing Xu Minghui is a pawn sent to steal the emperor's favor, you cannot help but treat her kindly because of what her sister meant to you. Xu Minghui is based on a real historical figure, but very little about her is recorded in historical records. In fact, the name Xu Minghui is not even from historical records. All we know is that she held the consort title of Jieyu to Emperor Gaozong, and that she was the younger sister of Xu Hui, a really good friend of Wu Yuanzhao from the first game. Now, let's talk about Xu Hui real quick. Xu Hui was much more prominently recorded in historical records, and she was an important character in the first Road to Empress game. Xu Hui was a child prodigy from the modern-day Zhejiang region. The historical record says that she could speak at 5 months old, that she had mastered Analects and the book of poetry by age 4, and that by 8 she was already writing extraordinary poetry and literature. Emperor Taizong heard about her talent and summoned her to court as a Cairen, the same rank that Wu Zetian held. But unlike many consorts, Xu Hui was valued for her mind. She was eventually promoted to a higher rank, and she used that position to do something shocking. She wrote a formal memorial to the emperor, criticizing his military campaigns and excessive palace construction. And instead of punishing her, Emperor Taizong praised her words and rewarded her. After his death in 649, Xu Hui fell into grief and refused medical treatment. She died the following year at around the age of 24 and was posthumously honored to the rank of worthy consort. And following closely to what happened in recorded history, Xu Hui did pass away in the first game. So now, without much information from the historical records to flesh out the younger sister, it would be interesting to see what role Xu Minghui ends up playing in the new game. Will she continue to be a close friend with Wu Yuanzhao, just like her older sister was? Or will she become another obstacle to overcome? Lastly, I want to briefly mention Official Xia. Official Xia is a fictional character in Road to Empress 2, so there is no historical figure to trace her back to. But her role is worth understanding because it tells you something about the world of the game. She is a temple official, an overseer at Ganye Temple. This is the Buddhist temple where historically many childless consorts were sent after the emperor's death to live as nuns. It was not a punishment exactly, but it was not a choice either. It was where women went when their usefulness to the court had ended. Temple officials like this would have managed the daily operations of the temple, maintained order among the residents, and served as a bridge between the temple and the outside world. In the first Road to Empress game, one of the story paths shows Official Xia trying to have a relationship with Wu Yuanzhao in exchange for certain favors. In order to make it to the story in the second game, we had to turn down her advances. So it will be interesting to see what happens with her this time around. But I'm pretty sure she is not going to be an ally. To me, this period of time is one of the most fascinating periods of Tang Dynasty history. We have so many people, each with their own agendas. And Road to Empress 2 will drop us right into the middle of all of these competing interests and ask us to find our own path through them. I hope these short profiles help to provide some useful background information for these characters, not just for the game, but also the history of the Tang Dynasty. And I wonder how they will handle the story path for Li Tai, since this time period is also around when he died in historical records. If you want to learn more about any of these historical figures in depth, let me know in the comments and maybe we'll do a full video on them. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
Stay curious, stay magical.